Hello, I have some people asking me every now and then what's happening with the CNC project, and I thought, well, it's kind of finished, isn't it? I mean, I'm using it now, but I guess what they meant was that I did say at one point that I wanted to try cutting carbon fibre with this eventually, so I still do want to do that. In that respect, the project is not finished. So I've moved to a new house here and I have it set up in a different desk. It's actually inside the house, which is a little bit better because I don't need to go out to the garage to a separate building to check on it and so on. Anyway, so the two problems I was having at the end of the last video, or all throughout most of the videos for one of the problems actually, one problem that I had, I don't think I mentioned it too much, was that the vertical axis was having problems lifting up. And the main problem was that I just couldn't seem to get it to approach the top part of this travel without getting it sort of binded when it got to the, near the top, because the rails weren't perfectly aligned or something like that. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but the trouble is, because I have very little clearance at the bottom, I have to raise the z-axis, has to come up almost to the top, to within about 3 millimeters of the top, to lift out of most things when I'm cutting them, so I don't have much room to make it stay in the middle of the range, down a little bit more like I would like. Anyway, so I managed to fix that by fiddling around with this. I took it apart and put it back together 2 or 3 times, and I also swapped the motor. I was using one of these pretty small motors, and I've swapped it to one that's twice the size. At least the black part of it is twice the size, maybe you can see along there. And that got rid of that problem completely. So the z-axis is now up and down just perfectly. I haven't had any trouble with it since I did that. The other problem was that when this spindle is running, it seems to cause some sort of interference with the communication between the computer and the Arduino, and that problem I have not solved, unfortunately. I did get one of these USB isolated doohickeys and I tried that. Didn't really seem to help that much. And I tried a few other things, but I recorded a bunch of video earlier which I will now show you, so you can go back into the past, and I'll join you at the end when I finish up. Oh, this is quite good. We can look at it from the side. Yep, that's good too. Alright, I think I'll stick with that. That seemed fairly fast. I don't know if I'd really want to push my luck too much more. See, the tool is here, so if we look on this, it thinks it's there. Okay, now fortunately this particular design has 2 easy to line up things. We've got this vertical line here and then this horizontal one there. So I'm just going to set the X and Y as best I can to match up with that by manually stepping it, and hopefully that will put us back in the right coordinate system. Get stopped again. See this? Stop. So there's still some instructions in there. So this is still going. Oh, alright. So it ran out of instructions. But yeah, this is fucking annoying, isn't it? What's the matter? Well, there's obviously a problem in communication between the laptop and the Arduino, and in between those 2 things I have this, so I'm getting a little suspicious that maybe this is not helping me. So I'm just going to try again without this and see what happens. Well, that was interesting. Didn't have any problems at all that time. So I think I'm just not going to use that USB isolator thing. Probably, I think the idea is good, but maybe just that particular one is a bit of a cheap and nasty one perhaps. But, looks like it has come out pretty nice. This was cut with a 2mm end mill, so it can't make the little sharp points like it's supposed to be on the end of the R there. But if you make the letters large enough, it still looks alright. And you can see along the top here, there's a little ridge where you can see the first cut didn't get all the way through when I had to reposition it. And I didn't get it quite right, so it's the second time it went round, it cut in a slightly different place there. Can't really tell too much though. But yeah, it turned out alright. I only managed to get one circuit around that second piece before it did it again. So it doesn't seem to be related to that USB isolator thing, so it's just stuck there. So what the hell is it? God, this problem just never goes away, does it? Well, I managed to get to the end of all those cuts there eventually. Had to do some resets along the way. It seems to be, if anything, slightly worse with this in the chain, although not much worse. So I don't think, it could be just a bit of chance that it was slightly worse with this. So maybe, I'm thinking it doesn't really matter. It does have a little bit more wire on it though, but this is shielded, so I don't think that's the issue. Eventually I had more success after I moved this wire for the motor away, like as far as I could get it over there, rather than it was sort of a little bit closer to the Arduino like that. So I don't know if that really made a difference, but what I'm going to try doing now is moving this power supply over the other side, because it occurred to me that doesn't really need to be anywhere near this at all. So I'm going to undo this and I'm going to shift it all the way over to here and have the power coming up from underneath on that side, and we'll see how it goes with that. Alright, well, I put this over here, so that's where the power supply is now. Power leads are going up there and over there, and all the rest of it, all the Arduino stuff, is over there. But it didn't make a damn bit of difference. It ran for about 10 minutes and then we just had a freeze in the middle of a job again. So yeah, still stuck. So here's a closer look at those two last things that I was making. This is just the same design as I'd made with aluminium in one of my earlier videos, except with the 3mm aluminium, the whole square is a little bit smaller. So I think it's just scaled up 4/3 maybe. Actually it looks a little bit bigger than that. Anyway, it's bigger, that's the point. And it turned out fairly loose actually. I was surprised that it wasn't a tighter fit. I'm not really sure what happened. It seems to be, it's a lot looser than the aluminium one was, but it fits together well enough. And that very last piece was of course the good old silver fern. This turned out quite well. This one was with a 1mm bit, so I wasn't able to go quite as fast, but it could still go pretty fast. And of course this is using pocketing. Estelcam has a pretty basic pocketing feature. What's that? Works well enough, and yeah, this turned out quite nice. Okay, it's time to think about getting some water involved in this whole thing. And this is not to cool the workpiece or anything, it's just to wet down the material while I'm cutting carbon fibre. So that was my end goal, and I've just been putting it off for a long time because I couldn't be bothered getting the water part organised. So I've been shopping, and I've got together a few things, which is what I'm going to use to do it with. And my first plan was to use one of these little pumps that I found on Banggood. It's a 6 to 12 volt pump, DC, and I thought, given that it's very small, it would, oh sorry, that's upside down, it wouldn't be very capable, but I didn't want it to be too fast or too strong or too powerful, because all I want to do is keep a little trickle of water onto the end mill while it's working. I don't want to blast a whole lot of water out. But unfortunately, it turns out this pump is actually quite fast. It says somewhere on there 280 litres per hour, which is actually quite a lot of water. This is the pump running on, there's around about 5 volts coming out of these batteries here. But even this is probably a little too fast for what I want. So I don't think I'm going to use this, and my second plan, or part of this was my plan anyway, but I'm going to have this tank here. It's just a plastic rubbish bin, and I'm going to put inside that this ball cock kind of a thing. It's like you have in your toilet cistern, so that when this float comes up, it shuts the valve off, and when the water level goes down, it turns the water on, so you always have a consistent level of water in the tank. And then I'm just going to have that above the CNC table and just let it fall out under the force of gravity. So that's what the wires are here for. This is just some hose that you use in a garden sprinkler system. And then I've got some little taps here. So you just put that into the hose halfway along, and then you can turn off and on manually whenever you want. And this also lets you control the flow as well. So I should be able to get a tiny, tiny little trickle, or potentially a little bit more than a trickle if I want, depending on how much pressure I have on the, depending how high I make this. And to connect this all up, I had to get one of these. It was a little bit expensive, but couldn't see any other way to do it, so that's going to go on there. And then this goes onto an ordinary garden hose, and then I think you've got to crimp it down somehow. I might just hit it with a hammer and see how that works. So even if I had used this little pump, I would still need some kind of a way to have a full tank of water. My original plan was to have a big tank, like a big trash can sized tank of water under the desk, and just have it recirculate. So this would pump the water onto the table, and then it would just go out and back down again. So it would end up pumping dirty water through the system. But yeah, so instead of doing that, I'm going to have this above the desk, and it's going to be pumping clean water, so it's going to be bringing in clean water all the time, and the water is going to go out and through a hole in the floor and outside. And as far as containing the water on the table goes, I had a few ideas for this, and my first idea was to just get some aluminium angle and make some holes and screw some aluminium angle down, and then seal it up with like the silicone sealant that they use to seal up fish tanks. And today I went shopping and I bought some of this core flute, and I bought some of the sealant as well, and I'm testing it on the aluminium, and it's actually surprisingly tough. There's just a little piece there, it's probably a bit hard to see, and it's only been drying for about an hour, but it still seals it pretty good. So that's that. But when I got home, I found in the back of the garage here, among some of the junk that the last tenants had left behind, some curtain rail. And this is a way better plan, so I'm going to do this instead. So it has a section like that, and it turns out that it slides in a 3mm screw quite well. So these are the little screws that I have hundreds of from my quadcopter builds. So I can just drill some holes and tap some holes for M3 screws in the bottom of the CNC, and then I can just slide this curtain rail over them,
and that will make a nice solid wall, and then I can just seal it up at the bottom with the sealant like that. And that'll be much better because it won't require, it'll be easier to build, I think, and it won't require me cutting aluminium and drilling aluminium, which is kind of a pain in the butt. And it'll be stronger than just having the core flute, which I could probably get away with if I just had that core flute and lots of that glue, or maybe use some epoxy as well. That might have been okay, but if you bump it, it's probably going to break. So I think this is a much better solution. And there's heaps and heaps of this curtain rail here, so shouldn't run out of material even if I make some mistakes.
So my initial idea for where to mount this water tank was just on the wall right here. So it'll be nice and close to this, and I found a stud, or whatever you call the piece of wood that goes over, right about here, which is in the perfect spot. And this house that I've moved into now is a bit of a shithole. It's sort of decaying all over the place. Look at the floor is in a bit of a mess, and I don't think the landlord would notice if I drilled a couple of holes in there to mount my water tank. But it occurred to me that if something goes wrong with that ball cock thing, or the seal from the hose coming into it starts to leak or something, I'm going to end up with water all over here. So I don't want that. And since there is a window right here, I thought I might be better off mounting the tank outside on the wall out there instead, so that if something goes wrong, the water's just going to fall on the ground and it won't be a problem. So I think I'm going to do that. Slight change of plans. The next problem is how to mount it out there, because I won't be able to drill into the wall on the outside of the house. But among the other junk that the previous tenants left here is this kids' basketball, what do you call it, backboard stand thing. So I might be able to stand this up there and use that to just hang my tank on somehow. And who knows, on a day like this, see how everything's falling apart? This fucking pipe hasn't been fixed for God knows how long. It's just falling out onto the ground there and making a huge hole. But if I hang my tank underneath that, I might not even need to supply it with water on a day like this. It's kind of raining at the moment. So that would be nice. There we go, I took the backboard off, and it's actually adjustable here. You can change the height with these two bolts, which is quite convenient. And it's worked out about as good as I could have hoped for, really. It's just sitting there underneath that. I'm not really thinking to use that all the time, of course. Just today I thought I might try it because it's raining. But yeah, it's great that I could position it exactly like that, and also have the freedom to adjust it as well. Okay, so that's everything in place there, I think. And there's a garden hose coming from the outlet over there, going into this, unfortunately, turned out to be leaky adapter thingy. Paid $15 for this and doesn't even work properly. Seems to be leaking from in between the brass and this plastic. So maybe I've done something wrong, but yeah, I think I might just leave it because it's not really a huge deal to have that much water leaking, and it's only going to be on when I'm actually cutting something anyway. So I don't know, I might just smear some of that silicone stuff around here and see if it helps. Anyway, it's not a big deal. And I put an extra hole in the top to just when the water gets too high, instead of just overflowing in a random direction, it'll come out this hose, and I'm going to sort of just stick it on here like that, so that the water will go down the hose instead of falling and being noisy, because now it's all going to be falling on this quite noisy plastic sheet thing down there. So over here we have the little tap just coming out the bottom there,
and there's not a whole lot of pressure coming out there at the moment because it's sort of halfway up the tank. I think the water level's just there, so it's only a little bit below the water level there. And this is where the CNC machine is, about here. So if it was going to stay there, it wouldn't be much use. But it's I've got the post at its lowest point at the moment, so this is actually all going to be about a meter further up there. And when we move it up, or when we move the outlet, you know, to be lower relative to the tank, we actually get a pretty decent squirt out of this. And it's still not super strong though, because it's just gravity. It feels like it's going to be just nice. But even if it's too strong, these taps here let you finely tune it quite well, because it takes 3 turns to go from fully on to fully off. So I can now just sort of slowly cut it down, and I can get whatever rate of squirt that I want. Quite handy. Turn all the way back up. I think this is fully open there. Yeah, but anyway, that's going to work out really well, I think. So that's the easy part done. Now I have to try and waterproof the main table of the CNC, don't I? Well, these barriers worked out quite nicely. They're really strong. And this is the back, and it fits flush on here. And for the outlet, I hadn't really thought about this too much, but I found one of these little sprinkler things at the hardware store, and it fits in with the hose. It should be symmetrical, but I've cut one side of it off, so there's no tapered part on the bottom piece. And what I'm going to do is just drill a hole into here, because this is 8mm thick, so I should be able to get a 4mm hole pretty much in the middle, and then I'm just going to glue this in there and drill another hole into it from the top, so that the whole thing will be flush with the bottom of the aluminium. At the moment I actually have this sitting on a piece of foam, like neoprene kind of foam, just to soak up the vibrations instead of having it directly sitting on the wooden table. So I could have tried to put something underneath, like a pipe coming out through that gap underneath, but that means that I'm always going to have it raised up a little bit in the future if I want to put it somewhere else. But if I do it this way, then I don't necessarily need to have the aluminium lifted up. It can actually be sitting flush, and this thing will be flush with the bottom of the aluminium, so it's should be a little bit easier to move around. So that's how that turned out. You can see the hole joins up there, and it's not going to leak. And these walls fit together quite nicely, except that they're a little bit curved. I don't know if you can see that there, but they sort of curve up and back, so they don't fit together perfectly at the top, like that. But they're pretty good, and the silicone sealant that I'm going to put in there will take care of that. I'll just tack that in place with CA, and then I'm going to put some epoxy around it to hold it a bit more solidly, and then I'm going to smear some of that silicone glue around the outside as well, just to make sure that it's actually a waterproof seal. And on the inside I've put a little bit of fly screen netting, that's just tacked on with CA at the moment, and I'm going to have to carefully put the silicone around that, so make sure I don't get it in the hole. Okay, that should be all sealed up nice now. It's a bit hard to tell. It's kind of tricky because it's a clear silicone, so you shine a light on it or you just look at it normally and the light kind of goes through it funny and it's a bit hard to tell. But we will find out when this dries properly, which is going to have to be in another video, I think, because it's not going to be for a while yet. But out there we have the little, what do we call it? Nozzle thing's been going there for about 4 or 5 hours. And the tank up there makes a bit of a chugging noise every now and then. I think it's just because when it nears the top, the pump turns off, and because the tank is kind of soft, it moves a bit and then it turns on again because the water sort of sloshed, so it goes chugga 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 like that for a bit. But it doesn't seem to be causing any problems because it's got through this 4 or 5 hours, and I've noted that the water level just goes up and down about 1 centimetre, which is quite good. And you can see I've put a little bit of fly screen netting over the top of that just to keep out the worst of the leaves or whatever the weather may bring down into the top of there. Should keep it out of there. And over here I managed to not get that one clogged up. Well, it's a bit of a mess around the sides. I was more concerned about not putting gunk down the hole rather than keeping it looking pretty. Anyway, so we'll find out in the next video if this is going to leak or not, and if it doesn't, we shall try cutting some carbon fibre. Thanks for watching.